The night split open with the crack of gunfire. The rooftop garden that only minutes ago shimmered with champagne laughter now reeked of gunpowder and fear. My breath caught in my throat, trembling against the cold air as I crouched behind a marble column, my fingers slipping on the smooth surface because they were slick with sweat. A scream tore through the night, then silence, broken only by the echo of another shot, and another, until all that remained was the hollow sound of my heart beating far too loudly for me to survive unseen. A hand seized my arm, iron hard, yanking me into the light. I cried out, my voice swallowed by the night, and when I looked up, I saw him, tall, impeccably dressed, his eyes darker than any shadow, colder than the barrel of the gun still warm in his palm. Cassian Moretti. His name was whispered like a curse in the kitchens where I worked, a warning never to linger when his men came near. Now I was no longer a whisperer of tales. I was trapped inside one. What do we have here? His voice was velvet and steel, smooth enough to caress, sharp enough to cut. His men circled like wolves, waiting for his command, waiting to finish what he had begun. I struggled to speak, my lips trembling, but no sound came. I was no one, just a waitress covering a shift, a poor girl from the wrong side of the river. But his gaze did not pass over me like I was nothing. His gaze pinned me as though I were already bound to him. Please, I finally forced out, my voice shattering. I didn't see, I swear I... He stepped closer, the scent of smoke and cologne enveloping me, and I knew lies would not save me. His lips curved in a faint smile, not of kindness, but of something crueler, something final. He lifted my chin with the edge of his gun, forcing me to meet the abyss in his eyes. No one leaves alive, he murmured, low, intimate, as if speaking to a lover instead of a witness. Unless she leaves as my wife? The words hung in the air, surreal, impossible. His men exchanged glances, some amused, some shocked, but none dared question him. My chest heaved and tears spilled before I could hold them back. He tilted his head, studying me as if memorizing the shape of my fear. Then he leaned in so close his breath slid over my cheek like fire. You should thank whatever God you pray to, he whispered, because something in me refuses to kill you tonight. But do not mistake mercy for freedom. I shook my head violently, finding my voice at last. You can't. I have a life. A life? He laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. Your life ended the moment you saw me pull the trigger. What you had is ashes now. What remains belongs to me. He pressed the gun flat against my chest, right above the frantic beat of my heart. My body quivered, but his eyes narrowed with satisfaction, as if every shiver proved his claim. From this moment, he said, his tone rising like a verdict, you are mine, wife, witness, prisoner. Call it what you will, but understand this. I do not share, and I do not release. The world spun, voices tangled in shouts around us, yet his voice was the only sound I heard. My knees weakened, but his hand steadied me, firm at my waist, pulling me against the sharp edge of his authority. I could feel the warmth of him, the dangerous thrum beneath his restraint, and it stole the breath from my lungs. I wanted to scream again, to beg, but something in his eyes silenced me. A promise of ruin, yes, but also a fire I could not name. My heart betrayed me with its wild rhythm, and he felt it through the press of the weapon between us. His smile deepened. Do not test me, Alara, he said, my name falling from his mouth as if he had known it all along. You will stand beside me, or you will fall beneath me. There is no third choice. And with the softest pressure, he lowered the gun, but not the claim. His fingers slid to my wrist, enclosing it like a shackle dressed as a caress, and I understood with terrifying clarity my fate was sealed, not by the bullets that had already fallen, but by the man who refused to let me go. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect moment to join our family. And to all of you who are already here, leave a like, write a comment. It gives me strength to keep writing, to keep sharing. Even a simple, I'm here, shines brighter than you can imagine.
The car ride was silent except for the hum of the engine and the quickened pulse in my head. She sat beside me, trembling, eyes fixed on the darkness outside, as though the night itself might rescue her. But there was no rescue. Her life had been folded into mine the moment I spared her. I should have let her body fall cold like the others, but something in her gaze had disarmed me, and I hated her already for. My men sat opposite watching, waiting for my signal, but I offered none. I wanted her fear to settle, to root itself deep, because fear was the only language that could keep her breathing under my command. In the glow of the passing city lights, I leaned closer, letting my voice slip into her ear, low and deliberate. You still don't understand, do you? This is not a negotiation. You will not walk away. You will not return to whatever little life you had. You belong to me now, Ilara. Her name tasted sharp, electric. She flinched, turning her face toward me with tears burning the corners of her eyes. I can't, she whispered, voice breaking. I have someone. He's waiting for me. I cut her off with a laugh, smooth and merciless. Yes, Tomasz, the boy who thought he could love you enough to matter. You will call him tonight. You will tell him it is over. You will break his heart with the same lips that tremble for me now, and he will believe every word, because the world believes what it hears, not what it feels. Her breath caught, her shoulders stiff. You're a monster. The words were raw, bitten through clenched teeth. I smiled in the dark, letting my hand rest heavy over hers, trapping her trembling fingers in my grip. No, I whispered, brushing my thumb over her pulse, feeling its frantic rhythm. A monster would have left you bleeding on that rooftop. What I am is worse. I am a man who has decided you will live, and that means your soul is no longer yours. The car slowed as the gates of my estate rose before us, black iron curling toward the sky. She stared, wide-eyed, at the looming shape of the castle as it emerged from shadow, windows glowing like the eyes of something ancient and watching. I released her hand only to touch her chin, turning her face back to me, forcing her to meet my gaze. When we arrive, you will not speak of escape. You will not whisper another man's name. You will smile when I tell you to smile. And if you disobey me, I will not hesitate to remind you that mercy was my choice, not your right. Her lips parted as though to protest, but the words died when I leaned closer, so close she could feel the warmth of my breath on her mouth. Do you understand me? I asked, each syllable slow, deliberate, heavy as a vow. She closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek, and whispered, yes. The gates closed behind us, locking with a sound that echoed in her bones. The car rolled forward through manicured gardens and fountains that glittered under the moonlight, a paradise built to cage her. When the vehicle stopped at the steps, I stepped out first, offering her my hand. She hesitated, frozen, but I did not lower my arm. At last, trembling, she placed her fingers in mine, and I pulled her firmly to her. The contact was lightning, her fragility against my resolve, her softness against the iron. Inside, the halls stretched vast and golden, chandeliers casting a glow over marble floors polished until they reflected every secret. My men disappeared into shadows, leaving us alone in the silence of the. She stood rigid, staring up at vaulted ceiling, trying to find strength, but I could see her weakness in the way her hands twisted together. I stepped behind her, close enough that my chest brushed her back, and let my words fall like chains. Tomorrow you will wear a dress. Tomorrow your family will be summoned. Tomorrow you will stand beside me before the world, and you will call yourself my wife. Her voice cracked when she turned her head just enough to look at me over her shoulder. And if I refuse? I smiled, dark and certain, my lips grazing her ear as I whispered, then you die, Ilara. But even in death you will not escape me. She shuddered, the sound of her breath tangled with mine, and for the briefest moment I let my hand rest on her waist, not to comfort, but to claim. Her silence was answer enough. She knew. She was already mine.
They arrived before dawn, when the sky still held the velvet of night and the world felt small enough to be bent to someone's will. My aunt clutched my hand as if she could stitch me back into the life I had been torn from. Her fingers were warm and reeking of perfume I recognized from better days in another neighborhood, as if she had dressed for a celebration she did not understand. My cousins, two pale, fierce girls who had taught me how to laugh with nothing in our pockets, pressed around me with eyes that asked 100 questions and said very few words. We stepped from the carriage into a courtyard that smelled of roses and stone and 100 polished promises. The castle's iron gates had already been closed the night before. Now they opened for us like a throat letting in a swallow of air that would not be ours to breathe for long. They led me through halls that swallowed sound, my footsteps small in a place meant for larger lives. Servants bowed, their movements practiced, eyes sliding away like secrets. I kept my head down, because to look was to invite recognition, to register the fact that I, Ilara Voss, with scalloped nails and a shift of starlight in my pockets, had been folded into the ledger of a Moretti family ledger, inked in blood and brass. My aunt whispered prayers under her breath. My cousins bristled with a rage they tried to hide, and I wanted to tell them that I was not brave, only hollow with fear, but the words would not come. They had come because of my eyes, because I had seen what no one should see, and because a man who kills as naturally as others breathe decided I must live, under his terms. He did not enter the room when we arrived. That was part of his theater. That was his cruelty dressed as control. We were ushered into a chamber gilded with mirrors and drapery, the light soft as if the room were trying to show mercy where none existed. They brought me a dress, silk the color of river shadows, and my fingers trembled around the fabric like a guilty thing. My aunt fussed with my hair, trying to reconstruct me into something presentable, as if the spectacle could overwrite the violence. "Smile, Kara," she mouthed, and I practiced a smile the way one practices not flinching from a wound. The telephone in the hallway rang once. I had to answer it. Cassian had instructed that I call Tomasz and end it, cleanly, convincingly, so that no one would chase a ghost or turn my mercy into a rumor. My throat closed around the name. When I heard Tomasz's voice, raw and bright as a morning bell, it stabbed me with a tenderness that had nothing to do with this place. "Ilara," he said, as if my name were a map he'd known by touch. I tried to breathe steady, to make my voice ordinary and calm. "I'm fine," I began, the lie already a splinter under my tongue. He asked where I was, and the question was an ache. I told him I was, somewhere else, an emergency, and I said it as if rehearsed. "We need time," he pleaded, and my heart wanted to jump into his hands. Instead, I flattened my voice as Cassian had taught me with his silence. "It's over," I said, and the word tasted like iron. He cried, he begged, he promised to find me, to not let me go, and I felt a coldness I did not own settle over me like a second skin. I hung up before he could say more, before the lie could unravel into the mercy it deserved. My cousins watched me in silence, fingers twitching with the urge to strike or to shield. My aunt cupped my face and said something in a dialect that smelled like bread and old houses and safety. Her lips trembled. "You must be brave, child," she said, though we both knew bravery and courage were different language. Bravery was the performance demanded of me, courage a quiet refusal I scarcely had breath to muster. I nodded because noodles of sound were required, because nodding seemed like consent to the world that had decided my fate. When Cassian finally entered, the air changed, the way light shifts when a storm moves above. He walked as if the house inhaled with him, as if the floors bent to his will. His presence made the chandeliers look smaller, as if even light deferred to him. He spoke once, and his voice threaded through the room like silk sharpened by steel. "Your family must know the truth," he said, and his words were an order gilded with a threat. My aunt spoke quickly, stumbling on politeness she did not have, explaining that we were poor, that we were loyal, that we had no quarrel with the Morettis, that a wedding, sudden and splendid, would save us from shame. Cassian listened with a patience that felt like a blade being polished. When he turned to me, he did not smile. He did not need to. He reached out, not roughly, but with an ownership that made my stomach drop. He straightened a stray lock of hair from my temple, his fingers warm and deliberate. "Tomorrow," he said softly, as if reciting scripture, "you will say our vows." Something in my cousins shifted. The youngest swallowed hard and muttered a prayer for me. The castle's servants began to prepare as if the rest of the world were already convinced. I looked at my aunt, at the two girls who had shared stale bread with me through winters of hunger, and in their faces I saw a terror that was not mine alone. They had come to keep me safe, and yet stood at the threshold of something that would change us all. I wanted to curse the man who had given me breath in exchange for chains, to spit and pull at the seams that had been sewn into my skin. Instead, I pressed my palms to my dress and felt the silk like a map of possibilities I did not own. When the hour approached for me to ready myself further, to pin, to powder, to learn the way to stand like a woman who had always been meant for this, Cassian lingered at the doorway as if waiting for permission he had already taken. He called my name, and the sound was small in the big room, intimate and absolute. "Ilara." I turned, and the room held its breath with me. He stepped forward so close that the scent of him, smoke, citrus, the faint iron of danger, wrapped around my face. "Be convincing," he said, voice low enough for only me. "For your sake. For ours." I nodded because my nod was a treaty signed in fear and a thin, reluctant obedience. As he withdrew, he left behind a warmth on my skin, like a promise or a warning. I could no longer tell which.
The sun rose with a cruelty that felt personal, bathing the stone walls in gold as if to mock the girl being dressed for a wedding she never chose. I watched her through the half-open door, the way she stood still while two maids adjusted the fabric over her hips, smoothing the gown like they were sealing her into something permanent. Her back was bare, elegant, the silk clinging like a secret. She didn't cry, not anymore. She had shed her tears like skin the night before, and what was left was something harder, something I had made. The garden was prepared as if for a monarch, not a Mafia prince. White flowers wound themselves around marble columns. Imported violins waited under a silk canopy, and every guest invited had been chosen not for love, but for loyalty. I did not want a celebration. I wanted a seal, a brand, a public claiming of what was already mine. She would stand beside me, wear my name, and speak the words that would bind her future to the empire I had carved with blood. When I entered the bridal room, her breath hitched, but she didn't turn. That small defiance sparked in my chest like a flame licking old gunpowder. I crossed the room in silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted her to feel me before she heard me. My reflection loomed behind hers in the tall mirror, both of us dressed in extreme, her in bridal white, like a ghost being honored, me in black tailored rage. She met my gaze in the glass, and the look she gave me wasn't hatred. Worse, it was resignation wrapped in quiet fire. "I didn't think you'd wear white," I murmured, my voice brushing the back of her neck. She held my eyes in the mirror. "You chose the dress." I leaned closer, placing my palm flat against the mirror beside her cheek, the glass cool against my skin. "And you wear it like you were always meant to." She turned then, slowly, as if dragging her soul behind her. Her pulse beat at the hollow of her throat, and my eyes followed it like a man starved. "This isn't a wedding," she said, voice low and steady. "It's a sentence." I smiled, soft. "Then I am your executioner and your salvation." She flinched as I lifted her hand, brought her fingers to my mouth, pressing a kiss to the knuckles. Not tender, not but something between. "You're shaking." "I'm cold," she lied. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. When the ceremony began, the music swelled like it belonged to another world. She walked beside me in silence, each step drawing us closer to the line she could never uncross. Her family sat in the front row, dressed in borrowed finery, confusion hidden behind forced smiles. Her aunt's hands trembled in her lap, her cousins gripping each other's fingers like lifeline. I felt their stares, their desperate questions, but none of them mattered. She was the answer now. The priest spoke in measured Latin, the words ceremonial and cold. When he asked for the vows, I didn't hesitate. I turned to her and took both her hands in mine. "Look at me," I said, low enough that only she would hear. She did. "God help me. I vow to protect what's mine, to destroy anything that threatens you, to make you a queen, even if the crown is forged from ash and bone." Her lips parted, not from surprise, but from the weight of what wasn't being said. She repeated the words she had been told to say, her voice soft, breaking only once. When the ring slipped into place, her fingers trembled inside mine, not because she didn't want to, but because she already knew there was nowhere to go. The kiss was not asked for, it was taken. I bent to her slowly, and when my mouth brushed hers, the air between us shattered. Her breath stilled, mine deepened, and in that pause, the world went quiet. Only the soft sound of silk shifting, the faintest gasp, the way her hand clutched the edge of my jacket. A noise broke behind us, a shout. Tomasz. He was being restrained at the gate, his voice hoarse with desperation. "Alara! Alara!" Her head jerked toward the sound, tears leaping to her eyes like a reflex. My jaw tensed. Rage lit behind my eyes, fast and brutal. "Do not look at him," I hissed, my hand tightening around her waist. "He doesn't understand," she whispered, broken. "I don't care what he understands. You are not his. Not now. Not ever." Her lips quivered, but she said nothing. The guests turned to watch the guards drag him away. Her aunt sobbed silently. Her cousins stared down at their laps. And I pulled her closer, my mouth against her ear, breath sharp, quiet, possessive. "Smile, Alara," I said, a command cloaked in velvet. "Let them all believe this is love." And when she did, when that smile stretched across her trembling lips, I knew she was mine not just in law, but in spirit. Because even through the fear, even through the ache, something in her smiled with truth. And that terrified me more than anything. I walked slowly, each step deliberate, silent against the marble, though my pulse drummed like a warning too late to. The city lights below flickered like the last stars before drowning, distant and indifferent. The door at the top of the stairs stood open, golden light spilling out like an invitation, a threat. I should have been afraid. I was. But there was something else laced through it, curiosity, sharp and illicit, like the first breath before a storm. He stood by the window, back to me, a glass of something amber in his hand, the other resting casually in his pocket. He didn't speak when he heard me enter. He didn't need to. His presence filled the space like heat, like gravity. I stopped just inside, unsure if I had crossed a threshold or fallen into one. His voice came soft, not quite gentle, but smoother than I expected. "Take off your shoes." I hesitated, then did as he said. The silk of my dress whispered as I moved, the heels clicking softly as I stepped out of them, suddenly aware of how bare I was becoming without even being touched. He turned slowly, eyes raking over me with a precision that burned. Not hunger, possession, and something deeper, an ache he wouldn't name. "I told you this wasn't a game," he said, voice velvet-wrapped iron. "But it doesn't have to be a war either." I stood still, heart thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it. What do you want me to do? He approached, not fast, not slow, just steady, as if the space between us had always belonged to him. I want you to understand something, he said, stopping just close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. I could take what's mine tonight. No one would question it, not even you. My breath caught, trapped between defiance and surrender. His fingers lifted, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face, his touch feather-light, calculated. But I won't, because I don't want obedience wrapped in fear. I want the moment when you reach for me instead of away from. I closed my eyes, fighting the shiver that danced down my spine. And if that never comes? His thumb ghosted over my lower lip, a silent. Then I'll wait, and when it does, you'll know what it means to be wanted. Not forced, not broken, but chosen. The room pulsed with silence. I opened my eyes slowly, found his watching me not like prey, but like a storm watches the sea, knowing it can devour it at will. I don't know who I am anymore, I said, the words trembling out. He leaned in, so close I could feel the heat of his breath on my mouth. You are mine, he said, and it wasn't cruel, it wasn't soft, it was fact, and soon, you won't just accept it, you'll crave it. I should have run. I should have slapped him, but I stood there, skin burning where his words touched, heart slamming against the cage of my ribs. He stepped back without a word, walked to the bed and sat, undoing the buttons of his shirt with a slow, precise rhythm that made the air thicken. Sleep beside me, he said, not looking at me now. No expectations, no demand, just your presence. That's all I need. I hesitated at the edge of the bed. Looked too big, the night too silent, but my feet moved on instinct. I slipped beneath the covers, fully clothed, my body tense, pulse fluttering. He lay beside me without touching, the space between us intimate in its restraint. The lights dimmed, shadows stretching across us like a second skin, and then his voice again, low, barely there, threading into my bones. Tell me something true, he whispered. I didn't breathe. I still think of Tomasz, I said, before I could stop myself. Silence. A muscle in his jaw ticked, but he didn't move. Then tomorrow, he murmured, you'll think of me instead. And I knew with terrifying certainty, he was right.
She said his name like a confession, like a wound she hadn't stopped bleeding from. And yet she dared to whisper it between my sheets, wrapped in my silence, under the same roof that bore my name. I didn't move when she spoke it. I didn't touch her. I let it coil through me like smoke from a fire I refused to extinguish. Tomasz, the boy who held her in photographs, the boy who still lived in the corners of her memory like a ghost refusing to be exorcised. But ghosts don't frighten me. I bury them. She lay on her side, the curve of her spine facing me, her body soft under the silk she hadn't dared to remove. I watched the way her shoulder rose and fell, as if every breath were a question she didn't want to hear the answer to. I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to shatter the distance between us with the weight of my truth, but not yet. She had to feel the ache first, the absence. She had to crave the touch before I gave it. Minutes passed like hours, like a slow unraveling of every thread she thought could protect her. Ilara, I said, her name slicing through the quiet. She stilled. When I tell you that you will forget him, I'm not hoping. I'm not asking. I'm promising. She didn't speak, but I felt her listening. I don't want to live in his shadow, and I won't. I sat up, letting the sheet fall away from my chest. This bed will not remember his name, and neither will you. I stood, crossing the room barefoot, needing distance from the heat crawling under my skin. The city beyond the glass stretched like something mine to command, but in that moment, it felt like nothing. Nothing, compared to the way she said his name without flinching. I faced the window, voice calm, but cut with something I couldn't drown. He can't protect you now. He never could. What he offered you was softness, pretty words in a quiet world, but you don't belong in softness anymore. I turned, slowly, letting my eyes land on her, fragile and still pretending she was untouched by this. You belong in fire. She sat up then, the sheet slipping slightly, her hair tumbling over her shoulder like something made to tempt me. Her eyes met mine, wary, sharp, beautiful even in defiance. Then burn me, she said, but don't ask me to pretend it doesn't hurt. A silence cracked open between us, and then I moved. Not fast, not cruel, just certain. I crossed the space and gripped the edge of the dresser, breathing hard, the tension threatening to split me open. Her reflection glowed in the mirror. She was watching me, always watching. I didn't ask for your lies, I said, teeth clenched. But I won't accept your loyalty while his name lives in your mouth. She opened her lips to answer, but the words were too late. My fist slammed into the mirror, glass exploding around my knuckles, blood blooming instantly across white. She gasped, instinct driving her from the bed. Cassian! I ignored the pain. It was honest. At least it was real. But then, her hands, soft, trembling, wrapping around mine. She didn't flinch from the blood. She didn't scold or cry. She just held me, pressed a towel into the wound, looked at me like I was something breakable. That look undid me. "You're hurt," she whispered, and the sound cracked something inside my chest. "I've been hurt since the moment you stepped into my world," I said, voice raw. "And I would bleed every day if it meant you'd finally see me. Not him, not the monster, just me." She pressed her forehead to mine, breath warm, eyes closed. "I see you," she whispered. "That's what scares me." My hand, slick with red, cradled the back of her neck. "Good," I breathed, "because I'm not going to stop until the only name you remember in the dark is mine." I woke with his warmth still wrapped around me, his breath soft against the back of my neck like a secret he hadn't spoken yet. The sheets were tangled between our bodies, the scent of him, cedar and sin, still clinging to my skin. I didn't move. I barely breathed, because if I did, the moment might end, and I wasn't ready to give it back. I wasn't ready to let the world in. Not yet. His arm was heavy around my waist, not in a way that caged but claimed. I could still feel the echo of his mouth on my body, the weight of his promises pressed into every inch of me like ink on a page. But what lingered more, what burned, wasn't the way he touched me. It was the way he looked at me, as if I were the only thing in his world not already owned, and he didn't quite know what to do with that. I turned slowly, careful not to wake him, and found his face in the faint glow of dawn slipping through the curtain. He didn't look peaceful, not exactly. Cassian never truly rested, but he looked less guarded, as if sleep had peeled away his armor, left him human, scarred, beautiful in a way that made something tight in my chest ache. I reached up before I could stop myself, let my fingers brush the sharp line of his jaw, the stubble there like grit against my skin. He stirred, eyes blinking open, dark, alert, immediately on me. But then, he softened, just slightly. "Staring already, wife?" he murmured, voice still heavy with sleep. "I thought you were asleep," I whispered. "I was," he said, shifting closer, pulling me to him like I was gravity, and he didn't want to fight it anymore. "Then I felt you looking at me like you were trying to memorize the shape of my sins." I smiled before I could stop it, because that's exactly what I was doing. "I don't think you're a sin, Cassian." His fingers slid along my spine, slow, intentional. "Then you don't know me yet." "I'm starting to," I breathed. And I was. The more time I spent inside his silence, the more I recognized the parts of him no one else dared to name. He was danger, yes, but he was also something else entirely, something wounded and ruthless and terribly painfully loyal. He pulled back just enough to look at me, really look. "Do you regret it?" The question cut through me, sharp and quiet. "No," I said, voice barely a whisper. "Not last night. Not you." His gaze darkened, like I'd just handed him a piece of my soul, and he wasn't sure whether to kiss it or guard it with a knife. "I warned you what I'd do once you were mine," he said, brushing his thumb over my lower lip. "But I didn't expect you to give yourself so willingly." "You didn't take," I whispered. "You waited." His jaw tensed, only because I knew once I touched you like that, I wouldn't be able to stop. I reached up, my hand resting over his chest where his heart thundered beneath skin and bone and secrets. "Then don't." He kissed me like it hurt not to. Slow at first, then deeper, his hand fisting the back of my hair like he needed something to hold on to or lose himself completely. And I let him. I gave him every breath, every tremble, every part of me that still remembered how to want without fear. When he finally pulled back, his voice was ragged. "I'll never let you go, Alara. You know that, don't you?" I nodded, my voice gone, my body molten. "I don't want escape," I whispered. "I just want to know if we can survive the world outside this bed." His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in the kind of focus that made you feel seen and claimed and ruined all at once. "Then let's start by stepping into it," he said, "together." And just like that, I knew. Whatever we were now, whatever this had become, it was real. It was dangerous. It was inevitable.
She stood at the balcony in one of my shirts, her bare legs kissed by the morning air, the silk brushing just below her thighs like a secret meant only for Rome stretched beyond her in hushed gold and stone, unaware that the most dangerous thing I'd ever held stood in that soft light, barefoot, claimed, and still not fully mine. My fingers ached to touch her, but I waited. Watching her had become a kind of hunger I fed with patience. She didn't know what she looked like when she wasn't trying to hide, but I did, and it ruined me. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked, not turning. "Before all this." Her voice drifted on the wind, and still, It found every part of me. I stepped closer, my footsteps slow, deliberate, until my chest nearly brushed her back. I don't remember before, I said, my hands hovering just inches from her hips. I only remember survival. She turned then, slowly, like she already knew I'd. Her gaze met mine, and something unspoken passed between us. Familiar and foreign all at once. I could see it in her eyes, the shift. She wasn't just enduring me she was choosing me, or at least beginning to. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly. That night, letting me live. My hands finally touched her, palms curving around her waist, anchoring her to the moment. No, I breathed against her temple. But I regret not kissing you sooner, before the blood, before the fear. I wish the first time I touched you, you hadn't been trembling. I'm still trembling, she whispered. I pulled her closer, until her back was flush against me, my lips barely grazing the shell of her. Then let me change why. Her breath caught, and I felt it, all of it. The tension, the wanting, the fear stitched with desire so fine you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. You're dangerous, she said. So are you. You just haven't learned how to enjoy it yet. She turned in my arms, her hands resting against my chest like she needed to feel the beat beneath. What if this ends badly? I smiled, slow and unrepentant. It already has. You're mine. That's the worst and best thing that could have happened to either of us. Her mouth parted like she had more to say, but I didn't let her. I kissed her before doubt could steal her voice. It was slower this time, deeper, my hands threading into her hair, holding her like a man who'd never known softness until now. She moaned softly, her fingers tightening against me, and I pulled back just enough to look at her. I have meetings today, I said, brushing her lower lip with my thumb, but I want you there, with me. She blinked, surprised. In your world? In our world, I corrected, firm. You wear my name. They need to see it wasn't for show. And what am I supposed to be in front of them? She asked. I leaned in again, this time pressing a kiss to her jaw, slow and deliberate. You be what you are to me, untouchable. She nodded, hesitant but curious, and I felt the pride surge beneath my skin like heat. Get dressed, I said, stepping back reluctantly. Something that makes them forget how to breathe. She smiled then, real, sharp, beautiful. That sounds dangerous. I turned at the door, letting my eyes drag down her body one last time before I left. That's the point. And when the door shut behind me, I realized something terrifying. If anyone ever touched her with the kind of hunger I did, I wouldn't just kill them. I'd enjoy it.
The dress they left for me was black. Not soft or romantic. Sharp, architectural, like armor disguised as silk. The neckline plunged dangerously. The hem hugged my thighs like it had memorized them. It wasn't a request. It was a declaration. A message stitched into every seam. You belong to him now. And I hated how easily I stepped into it. Hated how much I wanted him to see me in it. I did my makeup slowly, deliberately, watching myself in the mirror until I could no longer tell where the girl I had been ended and the woman he was building began. The driver was already waiting. Dark suit, darker eyes. He didn't speak as I slipped into the car, didn't ask questions when I pressed trembling hands against my lap and stared straight ahead. Rome blurred past the window, too golden, too ancient to care about what was happening inside me. The silence was thick, but not oppressive. Anticipation lived in it. When I entered the building, the guard at the door didn't ask who I was. He bowed slightly, opened it wide, and let me pass. That's what power looked like. Not noise, not threat, just quiet recognition of something untouchable. I found him at the head of a long table, black suit, no tie, sleeves rolled to his elbows like he didn't care to pretend anymore. He stood when he saw me, his eyes dragging over me with a slowness that made my knees soften, made my pulse trip over itself. You came, he said, and his voice alone made my spine straighten. You told me to, I replied, stepping into the room like I wasn't trembling. He didn't smile, not really, but something passed across his face, a flicker of satisfaction or possession or relief. I couldn't name it, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Cassian walked toward me, unhurried, like every inch of space between us belonged to him already. His fingers found my waist, possessive, grounding. He didn't kiss me. That would have been too kind. He just leaned in, brushed his lips against my temple, and whispered, "Don't speak unless I ask you to, and if anyone looks at you too long, look at me." I nodded barely. "You don't have to smile," he added, his voice tightening. "But if you do it only for me." His guests entered slowly, all suits and arrogance, eyes flicking toward me, then quickly away again, like they could feel the heat coming off him, the line they dared not cross. He pulled out the chair beside his and motioned for me to sit. The gesture was simple, but the way he did it, like it was already ritual, made my skin prickle. The meeting began. Words I didn't understand flowed around me. Territories, shipments, loyalty. But I wasn't meant to understand. I was meant to be seen. I was meant to be his, and I played the role he'd dressed me for. I didn't speak. I didn't look away from him. When one of the men, tall, sharp, too interested, let his gaze linger on my legs, I did exactly as I was told. I turned my head, met Cassian's eyes, and the temperature in the room dropped. Cassian didn't break the conversation. He didn't raise his voice. He just reached for his glass, took a slow sip, and said, "Look at her again, Victor, and I'll carve out your eyes and send them back to your wife." The room went still. Victor looked down. Everyone else looked away. Cassian leaned closer, his voice so low I barely caught it. "Good girl." My breath hitched, not at the praise, but at how much I liked it. When the meeting ended, and the room emptied, he turned to me, brushing my hair behind my ear with the backs of his fingers. "You did well." "I did nothing," I whispered. "That," he said, voice dark with pride, "was exactly what I wanted." And I realized then, I wasn't just surviving him, I was becoming someone else entirely.
She didn't need to speak to make a statement. She didn't need to touch me to undo me. She only had to exist in that room, dressed like a siren in silk, silence sharp as a blade, and everything I built bowed to her presence. Watching her play her part with such poise, such restraint, ignited something feral beneath my skin. Not lust, not pride, obsession, the dangerous kind. The kind that drives a man to ruin and makes him smile through the fire. When the room finally emptied and I was left alone with her, I didn't speak at first. I just stared, letting my eyes memorize every inch of her in that chair. Legs crossed like temptation had learned how to breathe, hands resting delicately in her lap like she hadn't just been the most powerful thing in a room full of killers. "You have no idea what you've done to me," I said softly, walking toward her like gravity was no longer optional. "No idea how difficult it was not to drag you out of that chair in front of everyone and remind you who you belong to." Her eyes lifted to mine, still calm, still unreadable, but there was something burning, a flicker, a spark, and it was for me, only me. She rose slowly, like she was stepping into that fire willingly. "Then why didn't you?" I stopped a breath away from her, my fingers twitching with the need to touch, to claim, to possess. "Because you weren't ready for that version of me." "I think I am now," she whispered, and those 5 words rewired the air around us. I closed the last inch between us, my hand sliding along the curve of her hip, pulling her flush against me. Her breath stuttered as my mouth hovered near hers, not touching, just tasting the space we shared. "Careful," I warned, voice low, rough. "You say things like that and I forget who I promised to be." "Good," she breathed. "Maybe I'm tired of promises." I didn't kiss her. I devoured her. My lips crashed into hers like a war I had no interest in winning. She answered with equal hunger, her hands knotting in my shirt, pulling, anchoring, surrendering. I backed her into the wall, her gasp lost in my mouth, my hands sliding up her sides, tracing the outline of power wrapped in silk. "You wore this for me," I murmured against her neck. "I wore it for both of us," she said, arching into me. I growled, teeth grazing her skin. "Do you know what you look like when you forget to be afraid?" She nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "Like I belong to you." My hand wrapped around her throat, not tight, just enough for her to feel the weight of my knee. "Say it again." "I belong to you," she said, not like a prisoner, like a queen, like a woman giving the sword instead of begging for mercy. I lifted her with one arm, her legs wrapping around me instinctively, and carried her into the nearest room, kicking the door shut behind us. The silence that followed wasn't absence, it was anticipation, it was worship turned feral. As I laid her down, as I stripped away every layer between us, I knew one thing with violent clarity. She wasn't mine because I took her. She was mine because she let me. And that, God help me, that made me dangerous in a way I had never been before.
The room was still thick with the remnants of him, his hands, his breath, his voice threading through the air like smoke that refused to clear. My body hummed with the memory of every touch, every word that had burned itself into my skin. But it wasn't the fire that lingered. It was the ache, the kind that came from knowing you'd just stepped into something irreversible. And I had. I knew that now. The man who had stolen my name, my body, my breath, he hadn't just taken, he had replaced. Piece by piece, he was rebuilding me into something I almost didn't recognize. Stronger, sharper, but no less vulnerable, especially to him. I stood in the shower, letting the water scald my skin like maybe it could erase the way his mouth had branded my throat, the way his voice had made my bones tremble without ever raising above a whisper. But no amount of heat could undo him. Cassian lived beneath the surface now, under the blood, under the breath. I wrapped myself in one of his robes, black silk that still held the warmth of his body, and padded barefoot down the marble hallway, unsure if I was looking for him or simply no longer knew how to exist without his presence close enough to touch. The house was quiet, too quiet, and that's when I heard it. Voices, low, tense, masculine. I followed the sound, each step careful, heart already beginning to beat too fast. When I reached the open doorway of the study, I saw him, Cassian, standing across from a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, elegant, coiled like a threat, dressed in velvet. Camilla. Her name slipped into my mind like poison, even before I heard her say his. "You married her," she spat, and it wasn't rage that laced her voice. It was betrayal. It was disbelief. "You married some waitress from nowhere, and you expect me to sit down and clap like a good little partner?" Cassian didn't flinch. His tone was ice wrapped in steel. It wasn't a request. It was a decision. She stepped closer, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "You were supposed to be mine. That was the deal. Your family. My family. You broke a blood promise." My breath caught. I should have left. I should have walked away. But I didn't. "I gave her my name," Cassian said, his voice low but lethal, "and I'll never take it back." Camilla's eyes narrowed. "And when she betrays you? When she brings everything down because she was never built for this life?" He didn't shout. He didn't even raise his voice. But what he said cut deeper than any scream. "If she falls, I fall with her." My knees weakened, my hand gripping the doorframe. I hadn't known. Not fully. Not until then. Camilla turned, and her eyes locked onto mine before I could disappear. She took me in with a single glance, head to toe, her lip curling in disdain. "So this is what makes a Moretti forget centuries of power. A girl who learned how to say please." I stepped into the room before I could stop myself. "No," I said, my voice steady, clear. "A girl who never had to beg." Cassian's eyes snapped to mine, something dark and possessive flaring instantly. Camilla looked between us, and I saw it, how tightly she bit down on her rage. "You think he'll protect you forever?" she hissed. "I don't need forever," I replied, stepping closer to Cassian, my hand finding his. "I just need him to keep his word, something you clearly never inspired." She looked like she might strike me, but instead she smiled, slow, venomous. "You'll regret this, both of you." Cassian didn't blink. "Then let regret come. We're ready." And as the door slammed behind her, his hand tightened around mine. "Alara," he said, breathless with something I couldn't name. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I interrupted, eyes on his, "because I'm not afraid of her, and I'm not afraid of what this is." He pulled me into him, slow, desperate, forehead to mine. Then God help the rest of them, because we had just declared war. And this time I wasn't standing behind him. I was standing beside him.
I had seen beauty dressed for war before, diamonds sharp enough to cut, silk spun into armor, but nothing had prepared me for the way she walked into the ballroom. The chandeliers above shimmered in deference, the string quartet trembled in her presence, and every gaze, every goddamn breath, hung suspended the moment Alara stepped through the arched doors on my arm. She wore deep crimson, not red, not wine, crimson, like the color of promises broken and blood willingly spilled. The gown fit her like it had been stitched over fire, hugging her body in slow devotion, the low back leaving skin exposed I knew by memory, but seeing it now, claimed in public, was something else entirely. Her hair was pulled away from her face, her lips the same color as the silk that wrapped her. I could feel every eye in the room on her, and it took everything I had not to bare my teeth and snarl at them all. She didn't cling to me. She didn't hide. She walked beside me like she had always belonged in palaces of shadow, like she'd been born in candlelight and taught to command without words. "You're staring," she said under her breath, not looking at me, but I saw the curve of her smile. "You're dangerous," I answered, not caring who heard, "and you know it." Her gaze flicked to mine. "You told me to make them forget how to breathe." I leaned down, mouth to her ear. "You made me forget how to think. The ballroom belonged to my family, my kingdom, but tonight, it belonged to her, and everyone knew it. Not one of them approached without my permission. Not one dared offer a toast without glancing at her first. They saw the shift. They smelled it in the air. She was no longer the girl I took from the rooftop. She was the storm that rose after. I watched her dance with men twice her age and half her nerve, her movements graceful, detached, untouchable, and still she looked at me, even when she wasn't. Every glance, every smile, every flicker of attention, they all returned to me like a secret language only we spoke. But then I felt it, the shift, the stillness. I turned. Tomasz stood at the edge of the room, his hands clenched, his suit rumpled like it didn't belong to him. He looked older than I remembered, more desperate. His eyes searched, frantic, and then they landed on her. "Alara," he called, too loud. too raw. Her spine went rigid. I saw the panic flicker through her body before she masked it, the way her fingers twitched, the way her jaw tensed. I moved before I thought, reached her in 3 strides. "Look at me," I said, my voice low, dangerous. "Right now." She turned, slowly, breath held, eyes wide. "I told you he wouldn't stop," I said. "But you're not the same girl who left him behind." She nodded. "Just once." "I know." Tomasz tried to push forward, shouting her name again, but my guards were already moved. He struggled, shouted, begged. My blood simmered. Ilara touched my chest, stopping me from going to him. "Let me." Her heels clicked over marble like a funeral bell. She walked to him, stopped just feet away, and said nothing. The room held its breath. "Ilara, please," Tomasz pleaded. "This isn't you. You don't belong in this world. You can still come back. We can leave. Tonight." She studied him, eyes soft but distant. "You were my past," she said, "but you were never strong enough to be my future." He reached for her, and I saw red, but she stepped back first. "I don't need saving, Tomasz," she said. "I never did." My guards pulled him away, his voice breaking as it echoed off marble and memory. Ilara didn't flinch, didn't cry. When she returned to me, I saw it, that final piece clicking into place. "I'm yours," she whispered. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't just mine. She was made for this.
The sound of Tomasz's voice didn't linger in the room. It lingered in my bones. Not because I wanted to turn back. I didn't. But because part of me, some small, fragile echo, remembered the version of myself that might have said yes, the girl who would have followed love wrapped in softness. But she was gone. Swallowed whole the moment Cassian touched me like I was something fierce, not fragile. Something chosen, something claimed. My fingers were still trembling when I returned to him. He didn't ask if I was all right. He didn't need to. His hand found the small of my back like it always did. Possessive, grounding, searing through silk. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw the war in his eyes. Not with Tomasz, with himself. The part of him that still thought I might leave, even now. "I told you," I whispered, my lips barely moving. "I'm yours." His gaze didn't soften, it sharpened. "Say it again." I took a breath. Let the truth fill me until it pulsed beneath my skin. "I'm yours." Something cracked open behind his eyes. He leaned in, his mouth brushing my temple like a secret he didn't trust the world to hear. "If he ever touches you again, I'll make him disappear so cleanly not even his name will survive." "I don't want him," I said. "I want you." His hand curved around my hip, pulling me closer in front of everyone, not caring. "You have me. But that means something now. That means danger doesn't knock here. It bleeds here." "I'm not afraid of danger," I said, breath hitching as his fingers pressed just a little harder. He smirked, but it was slow, dark, hungry. "No, you're not. And that's why I'm going to ruin anyone who ever thought you were breakable." He kissed me then, not sweet, not soft, possessive, final, and I kissed him back with everything I hadn't said, that I didn't want a way out, that I didn't need a white picket ending. I needed this. His fire, his wrath, his name curling around mine like a promise too dangerous to whisper. When he pulled back, his breath was still tangled in mine. "Tomorrow," he said, voice low, "we begin again. No more shadows, no more hiding. You wear my ring, you carry my name. They will see it, they will respect it, or they'll learn what it means to provoke me." "And me?" I asked, quieter now. He cupped my jaw, thumb brushing just beneath my lip. "You? You'll walk beside me, in heels and blood if you have to." "I'm not afraid," I said again, and this time I meant it in a way I hadn't before. "Good," he whispered, "because fear is a luxury, and you're done being poor." Later, alone in our suite, I stripped the crimson gown from my body slowly, the silk sighing to the floor like it knew what came next. Cassian watched me from the edge of the bed, jacket discarded, shirt undone at the throat, hands braced on his thighs as if he was holding himself back. He didn't move. Not yet. "You're angry," I said, stepping toward him. "I'm dangerous," he corrected. "Anger is temporary. This is permanent." I stopped in front of him, naked, exposed, unafraid. "Then do something about it." His breath caught, just once. Then his hands moved, slow, reverent, wrapping around the back of my thighs, pulling me gently onto his lap. "I will," he said, voice like smoke and sin, but not out of anger, out of love. And when his mouth found mine again, I realized something terrifying and beautiful in the same breath. This wasn't a man learning how to love. This was a man who had only ever known how to love like war. And I was no longer trying to survive him. I was learning how to burn beside him.
The way she sat on my lap, bare, unblinking, unafraid, wasn't seduction. It was surrender laced with challenge. Her body fit against mine like it had always known the shape of my violence. And still, it stayed. Still, it wanted. I hadn't touched her yet. Not really. My hands rested on her thighs like they were mine and they were. But she hadn't said the words, and I wouldn't move until I could feel the heat of her breath against my mouth, shallow and anticipatory. I could feel her heartbeat, a quick, defiant rhythm drumming through the silence. "Say it," I whispered. Her eyes met mine, dark, unflinching, lit with something dangerous. "Say what? That you know what this means, that once I touch you like this, there's no going back. There's no safe version of us." Her mouth curved, slow, and then "Don't be safe," I growled low in my throat, my hands tightening around her hips. "You have no idea what you're asking me to." Her lips brushed mine, not a kiss, just the tease of, "I'm asking you to stop pretending you're protecting." The breath I'd been holding left me in a single brutal exhale. She saw it. She knew that I'd been holding back, not from fear, but from reverence. From the belief that to truly have her was to lose myself in ways I might not return from. But now she was done waiting. I lifted her in one fluid motion, her legs tightening around me, her breath catching as I stood and carried her to the bed. The shadows shifted around us, soft gold spilling through the curtains, painting her skin in hues I didn't deserve. I laid her down gently, my body hovering over hers, the air between us thick with tension and something far more lethal than lust. "I'm not going to be gentle," I said, voice rough, jaw tight. "Not because I don't want to be, but because I can't. I've waited too long to have you like this, on your back, breathing my name like it's the only thing keeping you grounded." "Then take me," she whispered, "like I'm already yours." My mouth crashed into hers, a collision of fire and inevitability. She moaned beneath me, fingers clawing at my shirt, pulling, tearing. I pressed her deeper into the mattress, my hands exploring every inch of her like a map I'd memorized in dreams, but only now dared to touch. There was nothing soft about the way I kissed her, nothing restrained about the way I claimed her mouth, her throat, the curve of her shoulder, but every movement, every grip, was laced with something darker than desire. Devotion, the terrifying kind, the kind that doesn't ask for forever, the kind that takes it. She arched into me, gasping, her eyes wild, dilated. "Cassian, I'm here," I said, kissing the sound of my name from her lips. "And I'm not leaving, not ever." Our bodies moved like they had no interest in permission, only purpose. I felt her fall apart in my arms, her cries swallowed into my mouth, her hands desperate and sure and trembling all at once. And when I followed her into that spiral, when I gave her everything I'd been holding back, it wasn't possession anymore, it was a vow. I collapsed beside her, pulling her into me, her body curled into the hollow of mine, like a truth I'd never let go. Her breathing slowed, her fingers drawing lazy circles on my chest. "You scare me," she said quietly. I smiled into her hair. "Good. That means you see me." She tilted her head to look at me, eyes soft and raw and impossibly brave. "And I still want you. God help us both." Because now that she did, I would never stop wanting her.
His breath was still tangled in my hair, warm and steady, as if our bodies hadn't just rewritten the rules of everything that came before. The room was a cocoon of aftermath, quiet, golden, the air thick with what we'd said without words. I lay against his chest, skin to skin, and for the first time since my world cracked open, I wasn't afraid of what I'd become inside it. I wasn't soft. I wasn't saved. I was something else now, something shaped by his hands, carved by his voice, lit from the inside with a hunger that didn't ask to be understood. I traced the line of his collarbone slowly, watching the way his jaw clenched under my touch. He looked peaceful, but I knew better. Cassian was never still on the inside. Even now, with my body pressed to his, with every inch of him marked on me, I could feel the weight of everything he hadn't said yet. It lived in the way he held me, tight, possessive, like someone might still try to take me away. I whispered into the space between his heartbeats, "What happens now?" He didn't answer right away. His fingers slid through my hair, slow and deliberate, and when he finally spoke, his voice vibrated beneath my cheek. "Now, I make them pay for even looking at you." I closed my eyes, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't, because part of me wanted that, wanted him ruthless, wanted him unrelenting, wanted the storm that would tear down the world if it meant keeping me inside it. "You can't protect me from everything," I said softly. His breath hitched. "Watch me." I pushed up onto my elbow, looked down at him, and something fierce flared behind his eyes. "You're not a shield, Cassian. You're the sword." His hand curled around the back of my neck, pulling me close until our foreheads touched. "Then I'll cut down everything in my path," he murmured. "But I won't lose you." I kissed him, not to silence, not to soothe, but to seal that promise between our mouths. And when I pulled away, I whispered the words I hadn't dared until now. I don't just want you. My voice trembled. I love you. He stilled. Every breath, every muscle. Then he sat up, so fast it stole the warmth from my skin. His hands caught my waist, his eyes searching mine with a desperation I hadn't seen since the night he threatened to end me just to save me. Say it again, he demanded, voice rough, breaking. I love you. His mouth crashed into mine like that truth had shattered something he'd built to survive without. He kissed me like he was drowning in it, like my words had pulled him under, and he didn't care if he ever surfaced again. When he finally pulled back, his voice was a rasp. Don't ever take that back. I won't, I whispered. Not even if it destroys us. He smiled then, not his usual smirk. Something raw, quieter. It already has. I leaned into him, lips brushing his ear. Then let's burn together. And as his arms wrapped around me again, as his breath found its rhythm with mine, I knew I hadn't just fallen for him. I had chosen him. And now, nothing could unchoose it.
Love is supposed to make men softer. That's what they say. That it tames the fire, calms the blade, teaches you to hold rather than conquer. But loving her, it didn't quiet the storm. It gave it purpose. And the moment she said it, those 3 words like a loaded gun handed to me without hesitation, something inside me shifted so violently I almost didn't recognize myself. She could have asked for anything in that breath. My name, my soul, my surrender. I would have given her all of it without flinching. And that terrified me, because a man like me doesn't get to have peace. Not without bleeding. And now, I had everything to lose. The following morning, I met with my second in command. The briefing was short, tense. There'd been movement, whispered alliances forming where there should have been silence. Camilla's family wasn't taking the humiliation well, and Stefan, my own brother, hadn't returned my calls. They're pushing back, he said, quietly, but they're building something. I already knew. I'd felt it in the air, in the way the city breathed differently when my name was spoken, not with fear, with hope, as if someone believed I could be brought down, and it all pointed to one thing, her. Alara was my crown and my blood. When I returned to our suite, she was sitting by the window, legs folded beneath her, eyes lost in the skyline. She looked like serenity, but I could feel the storm inside her. She always ran deep, even when still, especially then. I sat beside her, brushing my fingers over her bare knee. They're coming. Her gaze didn't waver. For me, for us. A pause stretched, and when she spoke, her voice didn't tremble. Then let them. I smiled, dark and sharp, leaning in to press a kiss beneath her jaw. That's my girl. But later, when the sun dipped and the lights of the city blinked awake, I found myself staring at the cracked glass of my office window, thinking of bloodlines, promises. The noose I'd cut clean the moment I chose her. Stefan's silence was loud now, too loud. I called again. Nothing. Then the text came. 1 line. No name. No threat. She dies or we burn. I read it twice. Thrice. Then I handed the phone to my man. Trace it. Now. He took it and left without a word. I stayed there, fists clenched. Every breath. I knew what this was. Not a warning. A promise. A declaration of open rebellion from the inside. And suddenly I wasn't just a man in love. I was a man at war, with my blood, my legacy, my past. I returned to her that night without speaking. She looked up from her book, saw my face, and said nothing. She didn't need to. I crossed the room, pulled her into my arms, and held her like the world was already burning around us. Cassian, she whispered, fingers sliding into my hair. What happened? I pressed my lips to her temple, to her cheek, to her mouth. Nothing yet. And then, softer, darker. But they've made a mistake. What mistake? She breathed. They think I'd hesitate. She exhaled, slow and steady, her hands framing my face. Then remind them who you are. I kissed her like it was armor, like it was war paint. And in the space between our mouths, I gave her the only vow I knew how to keep. No one touches you, I whispered, not even God. And as the moon carved its silver path across the sky, I knew what had to come next. Blood or loyalty. There would be no in-between.
I felt it before it happened. The shift in the air. The silence that stretched too long, too tight. Like the world had taken one breath too many and didn't know how to exhale. Cassian's tension hadn't left him since the message. His touch was gentler, but his silence heavier, as though he was holding the weight of a blade he hadn't decided where to swing. And I knew, deep in the marrow of me, that something was coming. Not later, not eventually. Now. It was a flash of movement. Too fast. Too quiet. I was in the garden, alone, waiting for him. The roses still glistened with dew. The air smelled of citrus and steel. I turned at the sound, barely, and that was the only thing that saved me. The knife sliced past my shoulder instead of my throat. I gasped, stumbled back, hand instinctively clutching at the thin tear in my skin. The man wore black. No face, no name, just purpose. He lunged again. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I remembered Cassian's voice in my ear, like armor, like a vow. No one touches you, not even God. I ducked, grabbed the stone lantern from the ground, and swung with everything I had. The crack was sharp, not fatal, but enough. I backed away, chest heaving, blood warming the silk of my sleeve. Then he was there, Cassian, gun drawn, face carved from fire. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. One shot, center of the head. The body dropped. And suddenly the garden was silent again, except for the sound of my breathing and his fury. He came to me, hands on my face, his thumbs smearing the blood he didn't yet know was mine. Are you hurt? I nodded. It's nothing, just... He pulled back the sleeve, saw the cut. Something inside him snapped. Whoever sent him, he said, voice like ice cracking, is going to die slowly. I caught his wrist, made him look at me. Don't disappear into this, Cassian. Don't lose yourself for me. His mouth found mine before I could finish. Desperate. Punishing. Worshipful. I already have, he breathed. Then he scooped me into his arms, carried me inside like I weighed nothing. He laid me on the marble bathroom counter, his fingers tender and trembling as he cleaned the wound. His voice was lower than a whisper. You should hate me for this. I don't, I said. I feel safer with you than I ever did with peace. He paused, his eyes locking with mine. Say it again. I trust you, I whispered. He exhaled like the words both saved him and destroyed him. And as his lips pressed to the edge of the bandage, I realized this wasn't just war anymore. It was love soaked in blood, and I would survive it. Because now, I wanted to.
I should have killed her. The moment she walked through the gates with that smug smile, draped in arrogance and old bloodline promises, I should have ended it. Camilla stood in the center of my office like it still belonged to her, like she hadn't sent a knife after my wife with a bow wrapped around its hilt. I watched her speak, watched her try to spin the attack into strategy, into self-preservation. But all I saw was, you sent someone into my garden, I said, my voice low, steady. You put your hands on what's mine. She didn't deny it. That's what made it worse. She smiled, slow and venomous, like she thought she could still win. You married beneath you. You weakened your name with sentiment. You think they'll follow you when you bleed for a woman who doesn't carry the blood of this world? I crossed the room, slowly, quietly, and when I stood in front of her, I didn't lift my hand. I didn't shout. I let the silence stretch until her confidence faltered. Then I gripped her throat. Not to squeeze. Not yet. Just to make her feel the edge of the line I was no longer pretending existed. Let me explain this clearly, I said, my thumb pressing beneath her jaw. If you ever touch her again, directly or through the hands of another, I will end your entire bloodline. I won't do it loudly. I won't do it quickly. I'll do it in whispers, in pieces. Starting with you, she gasped. Not in fear. Camilla was too proud for that, but in fury, in disbelief. You would burn everything for her? I leaned closer. I already have. Then I let her go. She stumbled back, her hands flying to her throat, eyes wide. You're mad, she hissed. No, I said. I'm married. She stormed toward the door, but I wasn't finished. You'll make this right, she paused. I stepped forward again, softer, colder. Tomorrow you'll marry Stefan, quietly, publicly. That alliance will hold. And you'll smile through every moment of it like it's the future you always dreamed of. Her lips curled in disgust. You're selling me to your brother? I'm saving your life, and reminding you of your place. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I saw the moment she surrendered, even if her pride refused to name it. When the door closed behind her, I exhaled once. Only once. Then I turned, and found Alara watching me from the hallway, barefoot, wrapped in a robe, blood no longer staining her skin but still shadowing her gaze. You didn't kill her, she said, voice unreadable. I wanted to. I know. We stood there for a long moment, saying nothing, letting the rage curl back into silence. Then she stepped toward me, closed the distance, and laid her hand against my chest. I saw you, she whispered. Not just the fury, the control. You didn't lose yourself. I caught her wrist, held it against my heart. I only find myself in you. And in that moment, just us, just breath, I knew it was done. The war inside me had chosen a side, and it was her. Always her.
The castle was too quiet. The kind of silence that wasn't empty but expectant. The kind that wrapped around the walls like a held breath waiting to break. Outside, the sun was slipping low, casting long shadows across marble and gold, and every step I took echoed like it didn't want to be alone. I moved through the corridor slowly, feeling the weight of what Cassian had done, what he'd demanded, what he hadn't. He'd spared her. That mattered. But he hadn't done it for her. He'd done it for us. And I wasn't naive enough to think mercy came without cost in his world. I stopped at the mirror in the main hall, the one still fractured from the night he broke it with his fist. My reflection stared back in slivered pieces, mouth, eyes, collarbone, but not all at once. It felt honest somehow. Nothing about me was whole anymore. Not the girl who had poured coffee in silence, not the woman who had begged for her life on a rooftop, and not the wife who now knew what it meant to love something dangerous without apology. Behind me, I felt his presence before I heard his steps. "You're too quiet," he said, voice low, close. I turned to him slowly, letting my gaze settle on his face. Still beautiful, still terrifying. "So are you." His eyes moved over me, not with hunger. Something heavier, something almost reverent. "Do you hate me for letting her live?" "No," I whispered, "but I would have hated you if you hadn't." He exhaled, a sound soft and sharp all at once. "I've spent my life burning bridges before anyone could set fire to mine. But you?" He stepped closer, hands sliding around my waist. "You make me want to rebuild them, just to walk you across." My heart cracked a little at that, quietly, the way it always did with him. "I don't need bridges," I said. "I just need you to keep choosing me." His grip tightened, not from control, but from something deeper. "Then come with me tomorrow, to the wedding." I blinked. "Camilla and Stefan?" He nodded once. "If you're beside me, no one will question who I belong to, or who they answer to." I reached up, brushing my fingers along his jaw. "Then I'll wear red." He laughed, low and dark. "You'll bring the city to its knees." "No," I said softly, mouth brushing his. "I'll bring you to yours." That night, he undressed me like a ritual, his hands reverent, his mouth lingering on every inch like it was his first time touching fire. And I let him lay me down and unravel me until there was nothing left between us but breath and bone and the terrifying, unstoppable truth of what we were. I didn't fall asleep. I listened to the sound of his breathing against my back. I listened to the wind moving outside our window like it was chasing the promise we had just made. And I thought of what would come, the looks, the threats, the war that hadn't finished yet. But mostly, I thought of him, of the way his voice always broke a little when he said my name, of the way he held me like a prayer he hadn't believed in until I answered. And I knew, whatever came next, I wouldn't walk behind him. I would walk beside him. And if they wanted to burn us, they'd have to catch us first.
The moment she stepped out of the car, the world stopped. Not the kind of silence that slips in unnoticed, but the kind that demands reverence. Ilara wore red, not crimson this time, not blood or silk or symbolism. She wore war. War in the curve of her mouth. War in the way her dress clung to every inch of skin like it had been painted on by fire. War in her eyes as they swept across the marble courtyard where every guest paused mid-breath. She didn't look at them. She looked at me, and I forgot how to breathe. She took my arm without hesitation, her fingers resting just above my wrist, and I felt it, her pulse, steady, certain. The girl I'd stolen had become the woman I couldn't survive without, and tonight, I wasn't presenting her as my wife to remind them of her place. I was walking into that ballroom to remind them of mine. We moved as one, past polished columns and stone-faced allies, past whispers and poorly veiled stares, and when we entered the main hall, the music stuttered, just for a moment, but it was enough. Camilla stood near the altar, cloaked in white and fury, Stefan at her side like a lamb too close to the butcher's table. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at her. His eyes were on Ilara, wide, stunned, maybe even afraid. Good, because this wasn't a wedding. It was a reckoning. We stopped at the foot of the steps. I turned to Ilara, letting my hand slide along her jaw, slow, reverent, shameless. "You're not just the reason I survived," I said, voice meant only for her. "You're the reason I want to." She smiled then, slow and devastating. "Then let's make sure they remember us." I kissed her, in front of everyone, not tender, not polite, a kiss that shattered every lie they'd told themselves about who I was, who she was, who we had become. When I pulled back, the silence had teeth. I turned, looked out at the sea of wolves dressed in silk and tailored civility. My voice was quiet, but every word landed like a gunshot. She is mine, not because I claimed her, but because she chose me. And if any of you doubt what that means, try to touch her. No one moved. I didn't need them to. I offered Stefan a nod. The kind of nod that says, "This is the last olive branch you'll ever see." He returned it without a word. Camilla's jaw tightened, but she linked her arm with his anyway. The ceremony began. Ilara stood beside me the entire time, not as a symbol, not as decoration, but as proof that a man like me could love with violence and protect with grace. That the girl who had once begged to be spared now stood in a room full of enemies and smiled like a queen. When the vows were said and the wine poured, when the music rose again, the crowd loosened into dangerous laughter, I leaned down and kissed her temple. "This is only the beginning." She looked up at me, and for once, there was no fear in her at all. "I know," she whispered. Let them watch. And they did. Because we didn't just walk into that reception as husband and wife. We walked in as fire and wind, blood and bone, power and promise. And not a single soul in that room would ever forget who ruled it.
Time didn't erase the fire. It refined it, softened the edges, deepened the burn. Years passed like shadows stretching across stone, but the way he looked at me never changed. Cassian loved like the ocean, endless, consuming, sometimes still, sometimes violent, but always pulling me back to him. Even now, even after everything, I was still learning the language of his silence, still unraveling the way he held our life together, like he'd built it from blood and breath and bone. Our children ran barefoot through the gardens we once painted with secrets. 2 boys, 1 girl, each born with his eyes and my stubbornness. They carried no fear, only fire, and I knew they'd inherited it from the storm that raised them, from him, from us. The villa had grown quieter in some ways, louder in others. There were fewer threats now, fewer shadows lurking at our gates, but the ghosts still lived in the walls. Cassian didn't speak of the past often. He didn't need to. It lived in the curve of his jaw, in the way his hand never fully relaxed, even in sleep. And yet, with me, he softened. Always. I watched him through the window now, shirt half open, a glass of wine forgotten in his hand, the sunset turning his skin to molten gold. He was older, stronger, and somehow, impossibly, even more devastating than the man who once whispered my name like a weapon in the dark. He felt me before I spoke. He always did. You're staring again, he said, not turning. You were made to be stared at, I replied, stepping outside. His smile was slow, lazy, the kind that made my knees forget themselves. You say that like you don't know what you do to me. I stopped behind him, slid my arms around his waist, pressed my lips to the curve of his spine. I know exactly what I do to you. He turned then, his hands catching my hips, pulling me against him. Tell me something true, he murmured. I looked up at him, at the man I had loved through terror and tenderness. Even now, after all these years, sometimes I still wake up afraid it was all a dream. His fingers brushed my cheek, his eyes dark with something that hadn't faded. It wasn't. Promise me, I whispered. I'll give you more than a promise, he said, lifting me in one breathless motion. I'll give you the rest of me. He carried me inside, past echoes and memories, past the ghosts, and into the firelight. And when he laid me down, when he kissed me like we were still starving, I realized the truth I'd never said aloud. He didn't just save me, he rebuilt me. And even if the world forgot our names, this love, this war between us, would echo forever.
She still sleeps like she did the first night I watched her in silence, curled slightly onto her side, lips parted, one hand always reaching toward me, even in years haven't dulled the way she moves in sleep. She still owns the room with her breath alone, still turns sheets into altars and silence into scripture. I sit in the chair by the window, the one she made me promise to keep, because she said it was where I stopped pretending, where she could see me think without armor. I'm watching her now, the soft curve of her hip beneath silk, the bare skin of her back, golden in the early light. Our daughter's laughter echoes faintly from the garden, our sons already chasing the sun through the olive trees like they were born to run the world and still, I sit here, aching, because I will never stop wanting her. She stirs slightly, like she knows she's being watched. Her fingers slide across the empty space beside her and curl back, instinctively. That movement guts me more than any bullet ever did. I move to the bed, lean in, let my hand skim the dip of her spine. She breathes deeper, warmer, her body instinctively arching toward the weight of me. I kiss her shoulder, then lower, tasting sleep and skin, and the life I swore I'd never deserve. You're awake, she whispers, voice thick, sweet. I never really sleep when you're not in my arms. She smiles, not opening her eyes yet. Even now? Especially now. She rolls to her back, eyes meeting mine, and for a moment everything else fades. The world, the years, the war. There's only her. The woman who once looked at me like I was a death sentence, and now looks at me like I'm the reason her heart beats. You think we'll always be like this? She asks softly. I slide under the sheets, pulling her to me. No. Her brow lifts, curious. I think it'll get worse, I murmur against her mouth, because I'm going to keep loving you harder, until you forget how to breathe without me. She laughs, but it's quiet, like something reverent. You already did that. I kiss her, slow, deep, letting the morning stretch around us like a secret. When I pull back, I press my forehead to hers. Tell me something true, I say. She doesn't hesitate. You're still the only place I feel safe. I close my eyes. Then I've done one thing right, and I know, without question, if the world ever came for her again, I'd burn it all down without blinking. Because this wasn't just a love story. It was a war we won, and I'd fight it all over again just to kiss her like this. In the dark, in the quiet, where no one else exists. Only us. Forever.